What does it mean to you to have influence? What does influence mean to you?
Good question. I think you're naturally able to influence when you can build trust and communicate clearly. I think those 2 points are really key, and you can see it go the other way so quickly when communication breaks down or there's no trust.
Welcome to the Find Your Influence podcast with Anton Guinea, where we unpack all things influence and we help leaders particularly find their influence by talking to amazing humans and finding out what influence means to them, who they've been influenced by and who they have influenced. And this podcast episode, proudly sponsored by the Guinea Group of companies. The Guinea Group helps leaders upgrade, upskill, uplift their teams and their influence. Welcome to the Find Your Influence podcast team with Anton Guinea, and we're up to probably close to our 100th episode. Today's going to be an amazing episode. We got the wonderful Alyce O'Brien. Alyce is the founder and managing director of Level Up, which is a talent and HR advisory, which is based in Melbourne. It's a firm that helps organisations align people, align culture, and align strategic goals, which is really critical for business success, obviously. Alyce positions herself as a connector, an advisor, and an unapologetic believer in the power of your people. I love that. With more than 20 years of experience in the services sector and over a decade shaping Australia's talent landscape, could you pretty please welcome, if you're at home viewing or listening, give her Alyce a clap. Thank you for joining us today, Alyce.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Anton. Much appreciated.
Oh, I know, right? I know. It's prepared by the amazing Debbie Littlefair, my manager and partner in crime. So let's see, very well done. So Alyce, what's the backstory? Why HR? Why humans? Why power of people? Just very quickly.
Yes. I think growing up, I was always a person interested in everyone's story. And I do have quite an outgoing personality. And so naturally that brings me to a lot of people that I, hear their journeys. I've traveled overseas when I was younger. I worked overseas for Deloitte. And I think that starting point for me, just seeing in professional services, the teams that they ran, the strong leadership, the structure, all of that really played a huge impact in why I started Level Up and how that sort of transformation and journey for me began. I think everyone has a story, and mine, when I lived overseas, just being able to work with exceptional leaders, I was very, very lucky. I worked with the youngest partner at Deloitte when I was living in London, and it was an amazing time, but it also showed me and taught me the true meaning of team culture and what works and what doesn't. I was then also very blessed when I moved to Canada. I worked for an exceptional female partner, Lisa Ethans, who we still catch up all the time as well. She's just somebody who, again, made me realize the importance of leadership, empathy, all of those things that I think in large organizations, particularly back then, when you walk into a business that doesn't have a lot of structure, it can be really polarizing. And so when I started working in recruitment, because of course, when I was working within agencies, it's very typical to help businesses that aren't of scale. And so I quickly realized that structure, foundations, policies, any kind of procedure around talent attraction, EVP, the psychological safety, which obviously is a huge talking point at the moment for a lot of teams. All of those things are not necessarily something that smaller businesses have the opportunity or the insight to have. So Level Up was founded after years working in recruitment agencies. You know, it's very typical. Agencies do a great job, you know, if they're done right. But I think that typically what you would see is very siloed teams. So you would have a team managing technology. You would have a team managing digital. You would have a team managing marketing, content, design. I mean, it's very, very broad, but broken down into a place where to add value to your clients, you really need to be able to speak to the customer experience and how all of those teams actually communicate in terms of systems, platforms, you know, personalities. I know that that's a big part too for most businesses, but it was really formed because digital marketing and technology at the time, which is my technical background that I've recruited across for the last 13 years, has very much changed. So typically we would have seen technologists over the last 10 years working in marketing, and there was a real big push around marketers working in technology. So the landscape had really changed dramatically. And to add value to the clients that I was working across, I really needed to understand the market more widely. And so that was why Level Up was formed.
Wow. What a great story. I love that. Why it was formed so that the customer has a great journey dealing with an organization that's got all these parts to it that all service the customer in some way, but internally potentially don't talk to each other currently.
Yes, and you really need to be tapped into the wider industry professionals that you wouldn't really tap into if you're just specialized in the one area. And so that really was the starting foundation for Level Up. But honestly, it has grown so much. It's grown enormously over the last almost 7 years. And that is just because of the businesses that I have reached to. They're either entrepreneurs, business owners that have been running, 20 to maybe 50 people size firms. They're at that in-between stage of scaling to the next level. They haven't really had a full-time HR person in their team. So, you know, it's a real challenge for businesses that don't have that touch point to understand what they're not doing. And so a big part and a reason for the growth of Level Up is that we really look at the business, no matter the size. And, you know, I help businesses of 2 to 5 people. It doesn't matter the size. All of the challenges are really the same. A lot of EVP isn't done correctly. You know, job ads are terrible. Let's be real. They're not something that a lot of businesses do well because people don't want to read role responsibilities. They want to see, why should I come and work in your brand? What are you guys doing differently to my competitor? All of those things are really valid. And I think in today's landscape, and it has been like that for over a decade, but what we see now, particularly, you know, post-COVID, is that there is a huge shift and change in what people are looking to step into for a work life. So it's no longer about just salary. It's actually about trying to figure out whether this business will allow somebody's personal life to thrive as well as their professional. You have to have a marriage of the two. And so employees are definitely the ones pushing that change. And right now, particularly in the last couple of years post-COVID, particularly in areas like Victoria, as opposed to Queensland, it wasn't as hit as hard. But in Victoria, most people really want to have either some kind of flexibility, so it isn't an option to have everyone in the office 5 days. The fact that we're still talking about it and businesses are still trying to make that a recommendation is beyond me. But little things like, you know, what are you guys doing to benefit the world, the ever-changing world? What is your flexibility like? Do you have policies that are up to date with things like endometriosis, adenomyosis, menopause, all of these things that honestly, in over a decade now, I've only spoken to 2 businesses that even have anything like that set up. So the change for people in terms of what they're looking for to work within, it's no longer just here's a role, here's a job. You know, you kind of go in, you clock out. It's not like that anymore. Your work life has to fit around your personal life. And the teams, the leaders that you work with have to be personally invested in what's going on in your life.
Leaders need to be personally invested. I'm with you. I get that 100%. and beautifully put. Again, well said. And I picked up those 3 key points: benefit the world, give me a lifestyle as well as a professional work, and have policies around, things like menopause. We've had a menopause coach on our podcast recently, and Amanda was amazing. Amanda's out of the UK, and yeah, it's such a big deal. And get those policies right so that people feel safe, they feel welcome, they feel included, and they feel understood. And just goes so much further to creating a safe psychologically safe workplace where leaders have upskilled and really understand what it means to help people feel safe.
Absolutely. I think, it's still a topic of conversation, Anton, that not a lot of people are comfortable speaking to. But in Australia, there is Menopause Friendly Australia that everyone should follow. And Grace Malloy runs that for Australia. So businesses, I think, honestly, it's pretty small at the moment. But I think only as of like 8 to 10 weeks ago, there was less than 30 Australian businesses that actually had the correct policies in place for team. And we're looking at 1.2 billion
in Australia.
Yeah, in Australia. Yes. And
1.2 million businesses.
So no, 1.2 billion women will be in menopause by 2030. Yeah, it's huge. It's shocking to me. I've posted this on my channels. I find it really strange that people don't feel comfortable even acknowledging and talking about it. It is still something that doesn't get a huge amount of traction on my page, particularly on LinkedIn. I think there's still this massive stigma around it, but we do need to open ourselves up to more conversations, because as a community, as I speak with women daily, and I'm talking about really strong, beautiful, accomplished female leaders in Australia that have done amazing work in their career, and they have not felt supported. There's been no help, and they've been labeled as either crazy or all the typical things that you would hear someone say. So they've left business, they've left their career to either take part-time work or some other area that was actually going to fulfill them enough mentally so that they could continue. Yeah. It is a common theme. It is a common conversation. I know, it's mind-blowing. Anton, it blows my mind. I say this all the time. The amount of women that I could share stories of is really, really high.
Well, thank you so much. And if you're a viewer or a listener out there to this podcast, have a think about what you can do to be a bit of an ally for this process. You might not be a woman in menopause, or you might not even be a female or identify as a female, but maybe you can do something from an allyship perspective. So, yeah, and it's all about leadership, isn't it? And on that, it sounds like you said before, Alyce, you said you've had some great leaders. Who's been actually, very quickly, what does it mean to you to have influence? What does influence mean to you?
Good question. I think you're naturally able to influence when you can build trust and communicate clearly. I think those 2 points are really key, and you can see it go the other way so quickly when communication breaks down or there's no trust.
I like it, because no one will listen, no one will buy in, no one will follow you.
Yes.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Now, who's the person, who's the human or humans who influence you early in your career to end up, as this consultant for Deloitte, or this HR wizard, or now this business owner who's changing the world?
You're so kind. I would have to say it was David Evans, which was the youngest partner I mentioned at Deloitte at the time in London. And then subsequently after that, when I moved to Canada, it was Lisa Ethans, 2 very high profile professionals, industry known, well known, amazing leaders. They worked tirelessly. I've never seen 2 people work harder, but they had such empathy for the people around them. They had clear communication. They built trust so easily. And I think Lisa was the one that said to me, because I love to be organized, I definitely can manage many, many things all at once. I like to juggle a million things versus the other way. I am way more motivated when I have a lot on my plate. But Lisa was the one that actually said to me, honestly, you should be running your own business, Alyce. Like, you have all the capabilities and everything there. And so that was really a catalyst. And do you know what? In recruitment, every time I go to a recruitment agency when I was living overseas, they would all try to convince me to come into recruitment because I think the communication and personality style, but I wasn't prepared to do it. And then when I came back to Australia, I was leading some teams, and then I was doing recruitment across different businesses, like different business units. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to give this a shot. And, we're 13 years in. I love it. I love what I do every day. I love communicating with people. I think that hearing somebody's motivations and being able to align them into a business because of the industry touch that I have, that's when the magic happens. But also, it's a lot of psychology that goes behind it. I listen to what they're not saying. There's a big part to what we do as human beings and the psychology that goes along with it. When you've been doing something for so long, it's the cues that you can pick up on what's not said or how they describe something that allows you to then be able to look at your audience and understand what is actually going to work for them. I challenge most people. Everyone that knows me will understand that, I might not say things that you want to hear, but I'm going to help you get to that next stage if you can take my advice around what I think would be a path or a clear pathway for you to be able to take. The culture part is a really huge part to what we do, because I think most people come out of even earlier in their career a bit burnt by either a poor leadership or just under-resourced team, and they're a little bit lost. They don't really know which way to go. And so I'll talk with them around what is it that you enjoyed most about the industry, and then what is it that you're actually motivated to step into, and then we'll talk through what that looks like. In terms of clients, it's the same thing. I'll challenge them on the person that they actually think that they need. Mostly, you kind of just want to replace like for like. But with a business and for the continuing evolution of people, teams, performance, it all has to continue to change and grow and uplift as well. So a lot of my education piece with my clients is around, you don't really need to hire the same person again. This is what I would recommend. And, 9 times out of 10, Anton, anyone that I recommend and they actually hire, my clients will be the first one to tell you they discounted them straight away. I had to re-educate on why they needed to speak with them. And I think that's a big part of the success. I'm not afraid to challenge because I'm challenging the right way. And also the role type of what we do, it's not just looking at filling a seat, into a business. It's actually figuring out how can we get the best out of this person to offer the best to the team that's around them, whether they are an individual contributor or they are a leader. Because unless you have that cited and you have 12 to 18 months ahead planned out, you're not going to be able to retain this person. So it's always looking ahead and helping the business cite what potential they need to be able to bring in. And little things, these aren't things that cost money to a business, but it is setting the schedule of regular check-ins. And everyone can say that they do that. But mostly what I see is when a new employee starts, because they're so used to having people start in the team and it's a regular thing, they just let them get on with it. But for today and for the safety of everybody, it isn't just the candidate, it's the team members around them. It's the other departments that have to communicate with them as well. It's making sure that everyone understands everyone individually and that everyone's working towards the same goal. So even if I look at the last 2 weeks, we've had an agency that's a digital agency that needed some contracts reviewed because they had been working off updating an old employment contract for the last 10 years. And so we sat down and worked out what needed to be updated. And, all of these things form a part of making sure that everyone's coming on and everyone is going to be heard, seen,
Amazing. Mate, beautifully put. Imagine if more GM, CEOs, business partners heard what you just said then. Like there was gold in that, We do leadership coaching. We've done it for 20 years. And, I'd be out of business if leaders did everything that you just said then in a nutshell. Perfect.
Yes. Do Anton, I often say this. My role with my clients is for them to actually not use me anymore. It is to grow a business successfully so that by the right people in the teams, and for me to be able to help them with, our business offers a whole host of things like personal branding, videos for marketing, so that if, a leader, obviously they do so well internally, but no one hears that externally, and it goes to the EVP part. We look at if you need to bring in, overseas talent, we've got the connections there to be able to do that. Psychometric assessments, leadership coaching and training. All of these parts form why businesses continue to be able to develop correctly.
In saying all that, you talked two things that I sort of want to unpack. The first one was you said that psychologically you can hear what people aren't saying. For our listeners and our viewers, could you just tell them can you give us an example of a psychological giveaway that someone does that tells you that they're either maybe not being truthful or not being completely truthful?
Yes, I do come into contact with many people on the daily, and I would say that, at least a couple a month we'll try to give a reason for either why they're unhappy or why they're looking to make a move. And it can be little cues that I ask them around, what's actually happened, because everything's in confidence, obviously. The more transparent people can be, the easier it is for us to be able to align the right people, right? It makes common sense to be able to say that, but in theory, it's great. But when you're actually conversing with somebody, a lot of those cues for you to be able to pick up, I'm really happy in where I am, I'm not really looking to make a move. But then their actions, when we start to talk and communicate, they'll follow up, they're ready to make a move, but they're just not wanting to vocalize that they are. I think people get a bit concerned or worried that confidentially, is this going to get back to anybody? That's the easiest one I could use. But the ones that I think you need to be a little more mindful of are just people that would say something in one conversation, and then in the next conversation, they're saying something contradictory. So then you can ask again another question, and they might give you an answer, but that it's really not what they're feeling, but they're just saying it because, again, I think there's a bit of fear there. So it's just reading between those cues, but it's a huge part goes into psychology. And I think the other part to it too is sometimes people don't know what they want, and that's completely okay. I'd be surprised if everyone knew what they wanted to do. So in a bit of that communication and just hearing about their experiences, whether it is in their current role or their previous career and what they want to move into, that's when you can actually find those gold nuggets to be able to go, okay, excellent. From what you've shared, this is what I would see as a good fit for you. So what we typically see, particularly for people that are looking for either financial gain, everybody is today, particularly with the way of the world and the market, for sure. But outside of that, people will be attracted into a role because it's a high salary. But what that means, though, is you probably need to be working more than your typical 8 hours a day. So if it's an always on business, it's just giving them that insight to say, this is actually what your days will look like. So if you do have younger kids or you have responsibilities that you want to be able to pick them up or drop them off, that's probably not going to be the right fit, But again, you don't know this outside looking in. So it's just being able to understand if someone does move into a role where they're attracted by salary, there's probably not going to be any team support around them. So they're going to be doing everything from A to Z, which isn't going to suit somebody that's exhausted or feeling frustrated or coming out of a role where they're just a bit battered and bruised because they haven't had a good experience. So their best fit would be going into a team environment, somewhere where there's at least 2 to 3 others in that department so that they know that they have support and they also have leadership to be able to continue driving their career forward.
Love it. Beautifully put. As well done. What I heard then was patterns of communication, stories changing, but what I heard you listening for then was the stage of life they're at and their whys, if they've been burnt before or lost, I think you said, you need to be listening for that because they might not be able to articulate just how burnt or how lost. And I think that's really, there's some psychology in that.
Absolutely.
We love our psychology and we love our psychology.
Absolutely. And it's that multiple points.
We love it that much. We wrote the book on it.
It's that multiple touch points, right?
Absolutely.
Amazing.
So Alyce O'Brien, for our listeners and viewers, how good's this conversation? I hope you're getting heaps of value, which I know you will be. quickly, so the conversation that you talked about just before, where you said you challenged a leader who wasn't going to hire a particular person, though you knew deep down your heart of hearts after 20 years of doing this work that this person was right for their business and would help skyrocket their business. What influencing skills did you use to change that conversation?
I think influencing is what I do every day, but I have learned over the years that the best way to get results is to allow that leader to go through the process that they would, even though I voiced what I believe is the right way. I let them still meet with the other candidates first. And then when they're not getting what they want, I put the person back in front and say, this is honestly worth a conversation for you. It might be that that person is a different salary range. That's something that's easily addressed. Or it could be that they've come from a different background. And you know what it's like when I'm sure you're familiar with this too, Anton, any business owner or any leadership team, they always want to recruit the same kind of person, right? And this is where that challenge comes in around scale and making sure that everyone is safe and psychologically sound, because when you continue to hire the same kind of person, it does create problems when you've got all high performers that, you know, aren't going to be looking after the rest of the team and all the rest of that too. So I think a big part to it is just allowing the leaders to go through that process. And then once they realize that they do speak to the person I've recommended, it's like the penny drops. They're like, okay, I understand now. And then from there, that trust is formed because they know next time I say it, they're actually going to listen, versus having to waste some time meeting with other people that, it's still all in good practice that they do have those conversations. I always recommend it's very well, like the best way to go about any recruitment process is to meet with quite a few people so that you have a better benchmark for where the market sits. But ultimately, it builds that trust for them to be able to know when I do challenge the next time, they do listen. And that's where the trust is formed. And that's ultimately where the relationship continues. But I would say that I challenge more than not in any relationship. I even just caught up with one of my clients last Friday, and he was telling the sales director that, Alyce, when she hired the first person in our team, and I think I would have hired about 7 people since then, I didn't want to meet the 2 people that she told me were the people to meet. So it is every day. And I think if you do what I do, you need to be able to influence and manage those expectations, because people judge off a CV. That's my role, is to actually get rid of that judgment, because I've spoken to, I've quantified, I've had multiple touch points with those people that I've presented. And so it just brings me back to the psychology again. Every CV is judged harshly, like it is. And so you can have an amazing CV that someone spent a huge amount of time writing or paying somebody to create, and they will meet that person and they won't have the actual substance to back up what's on the CV. That happens more than you even want to know. And then the other side to it is maybe someone doesn't have the best, amazing CV, but they're exactly the person because they can quantify, substantiate, and talk through what it is that they need to deliver. So a big part to what I do is we don't change CVs. So when we present our candidates across, we don't change their CV because we want to be able to highlight how someone summarizes their experience. If you make everyone all the same, which obviously is a huge part to it, but you step away from someone being able to showcase how they write, how they communicate. If we use marketers or content people, design, they are all judged extraordinarily hard because that's what they have to do. They have to market themselves. And I'm sure you're familiar. People are really bad at marketing themselves, particularly if you work in marketing, communications, or design. They are the worst. The creatives are so challenged by selling themselves. It is the market there for that capability. They are always underselling. They don't have the confidence to be able to ask for a higher salary, and so they will just settle. There's so much to it that CVs, you shouldn't be looking at someone's CV. You should be trusting the conversation.
Just trust the conversation. I love the word trust keeps coming up for you. And the word that I wrote down before was, as you were telling that story, was trust the process. You said allow the process. And I thought, you know what? Trust the process and trust the person driving the process, who happens to be Alyce O'Brien. And and the fact that Alyce has got your best intent at heart and, through experience. And I think the other thing you talked about in there, Alyce, was those leaders that listen to you, even though I think they probably got a different answer and they want to hire someone like themselves, because that's usually what happens, because they're easy to manage.
Yeah.
And that's the most undiverse thing to do, because if you want to hire someone different, it means you're going to have to put your leadership hat on and listen to ideas and be in the forming, norming, storming. It becomes brainstorming, not storming. That at the end of the day, through all of that, you said once you are able to influence once or twice and you've made the right decision, you get credibility.
That's
People
right.
trust you more based on your track record. So I love that.
Yes. And if I can give you an example, so one of my clients I've worked with for, it would be 8 years. I built out most of their marketing, digital technology teams over the years. And they were a brand that was well established but had no brand presence in Australia. I work with a lot of those kind of clients, but I had to call a candidate that I'd already worked with years before. So this candidate had moved into a different business after a couple of years after I placed her. And I spoke to her about this opportunity, and I was saying, listen, I'm telling you, because she's like, I don't want to go back into this industry. And I said, I'm telling you, this leader and you are going to be so aligned. You're going to have career growth. And so she agreed to go to the interview, but the morning of the interview was pulling out. She called me and she goes, I'm not going to do it. I thought about it overnight. I don't want to go. And I said, honestly, I'll take you to whatever restaurant you would like to eat at. If you come out of this interview and you do not agree with what I'm saying, I will treat you to whatever you like. And because of that relationship and that trust of me placing her previously, she came out of that meeting and she sent me a text message straight away and was like, you're right. I'm sorry. I absolutely love this leader, and I know that I will continue to be able to grow my career. They've been since promoted multiple times. She now sits on boards and she's been with the business the entire time. It's been nearly 8 years.
Wow. See, this is really interesting, because you talk about other people trusting you, but I think you have to trust yourself first to make these big calls and to actually, have an opinion and have a view and say, I think you're right for this, and I'm going into bat for that, and I'll do whatever it takes, even if it's putting a guarantee on the line, like a meal afterwards if I don't get it right. I love that.
Yeah.
Trust yourself first. Trust the process.
I love that story because again, as candidates and human beings and everyone that looks on the outside in, that perception, we don't know what the team leadership is like. We don't have a job ad, or a business does not highlight, even if you're the top tech company, you might be assuming that you're highlighting all the great things that your business does. But I'm telling you, your business won't highlight all the internal stuff that is behind the scenes, And so it is about understanding where someone's looking to go in their career and what they're looking for long term, to then know the kind of personality. This person was amazing personality, very outgoing, high energy, someone that's she's not a shrinking flower. So she's going to want to have someone that invests in her. She's going to want to have someone that's got a plan in place. All of those things, not every leader can provide. And so knowing the business and knowing that leader, I was able to identify that they would be able to invest. And because of the scale of the business, they would have the right programs and development in place for her to be able to thrive.
Wow. Love that. Back yourself. Alyce O'Brien. Love it. So, Alyce, a lot of this, so we've talked about influence, who influenced you, how you influence others, what influence means, trust, clear communication. A lot of the conversation today, you've sort of defaulted to a degree to leadership, which I think is really, really important. Have you got like a leadership mantra or a leadership philosophy, or like we've talked about influence, what's leadership mean to you, Alyce?
Honestly, leading with the heart. I know it's very cliche, but I just believe that a lot of people lead with logic. They use their mind, and, there has to be a space for that too, but you have to lead with your heart. And I think that is something that it takes a bit of practice to do, but the more that you do it, the more that you'll see the results.
Right. What does that look like? You said it takes practice. What does it look like in practice, Alyce? For all of our leaders out there, there's going to be a bit of gold in this. So what does leading with your heart look like, say, on a day-to-day basis or a decision-by-decision basis?
I think you need to be true to yourself around what makes you happy and what feels good. Ultimately, everyone has to make tough decisions, right? Everyone does. Particularly if you're a business owner, you have to make a million tough decisions a day. But you have to continually ask yourself, how does this feel to me? Is there another way that we could look at this? And that's what you want to continue to drive forward. If it is your team, we can be very set, particularly business owners that I work with, they can be very set in what their mind has told them to do. And they haven't had somebody maybe challenging them or looking at things from a different lens before. So a conversation like that for me is very easy to be able to say, what does your heart say? What do you actually want the result to be? And then we'll work backwards from there to see if we can come at it from a different angle. But we forget in business. I mean, it's very easy. Everyone's very busy. Most businesses that are doing well and most successful people, whether they are managers or leaders, they don't have that time to be able to check in with themselves because they're just in go mode. But if you can just ask, what does your heart feel? And I'll do this a lot when a business is unsure of a candidate or they're unsure of what they're looking to accept. We'll break down what does this look like for you when you have a happy person in the team? What are they delivering? How are they engaging with everybody in the business?
What does it look like and what does it feel like? And I think some of that heart stuff is, how is this decision going to impact other humans? I think is a little bit of a heart as well. How am I going to convey this message in a way that doesn't...
A lot of factors into it.
Love it. Thanks so much, Alyce O'Brien. You've been phenomenal today. There has been so much gold in this. Appreciate it very much. Massive gratitude to Alyce O'Brien today, team. You've been listening to Alyce O'Brien, who is the Managing Director of Level Up. And, of course, the last question that I ask our podcast guests is, Alyce, if you're me and you're a podcast host talking about influence and leadership, who is the human or humans that you would recommend that I talk to next? Pretty please.
I've probably got a few there to throw at you. So let me say the first one, because it ties into a bit about what I do and we collaborate a fair bit too, would be Grant Butterus. He's at the Butterfly Effect.
Gee, you're nice. So kind.
Oh.
Thank you so very much.
Oh, love you so much. Thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening or viewing our Find Your Influence podcast with Anton Guinea. Another great chat. Please be one of the 10% of people who follow and subscribe and like our videos so that you can get more of them and you can hear more of our amazing conversations, the conversations that I get to have and that I get to share.